Chairman Park Seong-woo had not paused once that day. At dawn, he approved a hostile takeover in Uido that would erase a rival logistics firm by sunset. At noon, he signed off on a quiet resolution in Incheon Harbor, no police report, no witnesses. By evening, his convoy glided up the hill to his Songbuk-dong residence, headlights washing over stone walls that had never heard a raised voice. Seong-woo prided himself on control. Control of markets. Control of men. Control of his own pulse. That was why the pen stopping mid-stroke shocked him. On the security monitor embedded in his desk, the new housekeeper moved through the kitchen with slow, precise efficiency. She wiped the counter, aligned the bowls, and adjusted the tea tray to a right angle no one else would notice. She did not look up. Nothing about her mattered. Except for the ring. Thin copper wire. Twisted unevenly. A small dark stone set at its center, chipped on one edge. It was not gold. Not jade. Not silver. It was the kind of thing a child would make with shaking hands and too much hope. Seong-woo felt his chest tighten. The document in front of him blurred. His assistant stood in the doorway, waiting for the signature that always came without hesitation. Seong-woo's hand remained frozen above the paper. Sir. He blinked. Signed. Dismissed the man with a gesture. When the door closed, he rewound the footage. The housekeeper moved through the frame again. Same motion. Same precision. The ring caught the overhead light for less than a second, dull copper, crude metalwork, worthless to anyone who didn't know its weight. Seong-woo knew. He had made it himself. 20 years ago, in a place he had spent 2 decades burying under concrete and silence and carefully constructed distance. A place where winter cut through broken windows and dinner was barely stretched thin with water. A place where a girl wore a ring he twisted from stolen wire and a cracked rosary bead. His breath came shallow. The housekeeper disappeared off-screen, carrying the tray toward the upstairs rooms. She moved like someone who had learned to occupy as little space as possible. Someone who understood that visibility could be dangerous. Seong-woo replayed the footage a third time. Then a fourth. The ring never left her finger. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, he still had not looked away from the monitor. The copper was dull. Oxidized in places. The wire had been twisted with uneven pressure, tighter on one side, loose on the other. The black stone was not even a stone. It was a bead from a broken rosary, its surface scratched and clouded. No jeweler would have called it craftsmanship. But Seong-woo remembered the blood on his fingers the night he made it. He sat in his office, the monitor paused on a single frame. The housekeeper's hand rested on the edge of a counter, fingers spread just enough for the ring to be visible. The overhead light caught the wire at an angle that made it look almost deliberate. It was not deliberate. It was survival disguised as sentiment. Seong-woo's hand moved to his chest without thinking. His pulse was faster than it should have been. Faster than it had been during the Incheon negotiation. Faster than it had been when his convoy was ambushed 3 years ago in Gangnam. This was different. This was something he could not outmaneuver. He opened his laptop and pulled the housekeeper's file. Mina Lee. 36. Extensive experience in private residences. No social media. No complaints. References from a small agency in Itaewon. Start date, 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. He had slept 6 hours the first week she arrived. Then 7. By the 3rd week, he woke without the usual tightness in his jaw, without the phantom weight pressing against his ribs. He told himself it was the tea she brewed. The way she opened the windows in the morning. The way the house felt less like a monument and more like a place where breathing was allowed. He told himself it meant nothing. But the ring. The ring meant everything. He switched back to the live feed. She was in the library now, dusting shelves with the same methodical care. She did not hum. Did not speak. Did not glance at the security camera even once. She knew where they were. Most employees forget within a week. They relaxed. They spoke to themselves. They moved carelessly. Not her. She moved like someone who had spent a lifetime aware of being watched. Songwoo zoomed in on her hand. The ring had scratches. New ones. The wire had bent slightly near the base, as if it had been caught on something recently. But she had not removed it. Had not adjusted it. Had not tried to hide it. She wore it the way someone wears a scar. Visible. Undeniable. Unapologetic. His phone buzzed. A meeting in an hour. He dismissed the notification without reading it. Instead, he pulled up footage from 2 nights ago. The housekeeper is in the kitchen. Late. After he had already gone upstairs. She stood at the counter, staring at a bowl he had left there that morning before leaving for a Lunar New Year planning session. Tekguk. Overcooked rice cakes floating in thin broth. The same dish that Garam Children's Home served every year. Her hand hovered above the bowl for 3 seconds. Then she covered it. Not with a lid. With her palm. As if protecting it from the air itself. She stood there for another 10 seconds. Then she walked away. Songwoo closed the laptop. He knew exactly where the ring had been made. And he knew exactly who she was. Before he was Chairman Park, before the tabloids whispered about his influence and the prosecutors avoided his name, he had been Park Song-woo, age 16, sleeping in a converted storage room behind Garam Children's Home near the outskirts of Suwon. Winters there were cruel. The radiators failed more often than they worked. Dinner was barley rice stretched thin with water, served in metal bowls that burned fingers and went cold within minutes. Fights broke out over socks. Over blankets. Over nothing. The staff rotated every few months. They came with good intentions and left with tired eyes and paperwork that never quite matched reality. No one stayed long enough to remember names. Song-woo learned early that survival required invisibility. He kept his head down. He ate quickly. He did not complain when older boys took his portion or when the director assigned him laundry duty in winter. He learned to sleep through a cold. Through noise. Through the kind of hunger that made bones ache. And then there was Mina. She arrived in autumn, small and quiet and darker than anyone else in the home. Her Korean was careful. Formal. Learned from television and old books rather than playgrounds or family dinners. No one knew where she came from. Some said she was the daughter of a foreign soldier. Others said she had been abandoned at a church in Itaewon. The director said nothing, which meant the paperwork was incomplete or non-existent. The staff called her polite. The boys called her other things. Song-woo stood in front of her for the first time without thinking. Not because he was strong, he was not. Not because he was brave, he was not that either. But because when she looked at him after he blocked a shove meant for her, she looked grateful. And gratitude was something he had not felt in a long time. They shared food when there was extra. They shared silence when there was none. On nights when the moon hung low over the rusted fence, they sat on the broken bench near the courtyard and talked about escape. "I'll buy a house near the river," he said once, pointing nowhere in particular. "I don't need a house," she replied. "Just a place that doesn't disappear." Her voice was steady. Not hopeful. Not hopeless. Just steady. Song-woo understood that steadiness. It was the same steadiness he used to survive each day without breaking. Winter came harder that year. The radiators failed in December. The director brought in portable heaters, but there were only 3 for 40 children. Fights escalated. A boy broke his wrist. Another disappeared for 3 days and returned with frostbite. Mina stopped eating during meals. Songwoo noticed because he had learned to notice everything about her. The way she passed her portion to the younger children. The way she wrapped her hands in her sleeves when no one was looking. The way she stood near the broken heater in the laundry room was just to feel warmth for a few minutes. He started bringing her food late at night. Leftover rice. Half a boiled egg. A piece of dried squid he stole from the kitchen storage. She never asked where it came from. She just accepted it with the same quiet gratitude. One night in January, Songwoo found a broken heater in the storage shed. The copper wire inside was still intact. He pulled it free with hands that shook from cold and adrenaline. Near the temple on the hill behind the home, he found a cracked rosary bead someone had left at the base of a stone Buddha. The bead was black. Unremarkable. Chipped on one edge. He brought both back to the laundry room. For 3 nights, he twisted the copper wire by hand. His fingers bled. The metal cut into his palms. He worked in silence, hidden behind rows of drying sheets, while the other children slept. The ring was crude. Asymmetrical. Ugly by any standard. But it was his. On the 4th night, he found Mina alone in the courtyard, staring at the fence. He held out the ring. His hands shook worse than they had when he made it. "I'll marry you," he said. The words came out too fast. Too desperate. Too much like a promise he had no right to make. Mina looked at the ring for a long time. Then she slid it onto her finger. She did not smile. Did not cry. Did not say anything that sounded like love. She just nodded. 2 weeks later, a black sedan arrived. The man who stepped out of the sedan wore a suit that cost more than everything Songwoo had ever owned. His shoes were polished. His voice was quiet. His eyes were the kind that had seen enough to stop asking questions. He spoke to the director in the main office for 20 minutes. Songwoo was called in after. The director did not look at him when she explained. A family had offered to sponsor his education. Provide housing. Ensure a future. The paperwork was already signed. He would leave the next morning. "You're very fortunate," she said. Songwoo nodded because nodding was expected. The man in the suit waited outside. When Songwoo stepped into the hallway, the man handed him a folder. Inside were documents. A new school. A new name. A new address in a part of Seoul that Songwoo had only seen on television. "There are conditions," the man said. Songwoo waited. No contact with the past. No return visits. No exceptions. The man's voice did not change. Did not soften. Did not apologize. "Do you understand?" Songwoo understood. He understood that escape had a price. That survival required erasure. That the life he was being offered demanded he become someone else entirely. He understood that Mina was not part of the offer. That night, Songwoo packed his things. 1 bag. 1 change of clothes. A book he had stolen from the library months ago and never returned. He did not go to the courtyard. He did not find Mina. He told himself it was better this way. That she would understand. Those promises made by children in desperate places were not real promises. He told himself he would come back. He told himself many things that night. None of them was true. The sedan arrived at dawn. Songwoo climbed into the back seat without looking at the building. The driver pulled away slowly, gravel crunching under the tires. Songwoo did not look back. He learned later that the man in the suit was connected to a network of families who controlled logistics, construction, and other businesses the newspapers never named directly. They invested in promising children the way investors bought stocks, early, quietly, with long-term returns in mind. Songwoo was relocated to a private academy in Gangnam. His records were rewritten. His past was sealed. His new guardians were polite, distant, and efficient. They did not ask about his childhood. They did not ask about the orphanage. They did not ask if he had left anyone behind. Song-woo learned quickly. He learned Korean history, English literature, and advanced mathematics. He learned how to dress. How to speak. How to sit in rooms with people who had never been cold or hungry or afraid. He learned to suppress memory the way he had once suppressed hunger. By the time he turned 18, Park Song-woo from Garam Children's Home no longer existed. Chairman Park Song-woo, heir to influence and silent power, had taken his place. He told himself the trade had been worth it. He told himself he had made the right choice. He told himself he would never think about the ring again. But the past never agreed to disappear. The house had been silent for years. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that pressed against walls and settled into corners and made every footstep feel like an intrusion. Song-woo had grown accustomed to it. Silence meant control. Silence meant no unexpected variables. Silence meant no one asking questions he did not want to answer. And then Mina Lee arrived. She came on a Tuesday, carrying a single bag and wearing a plain gray dress that looked like it had been chosen specifically to avoid memory. His assistant had briefed him the day before, experienced, professional, excellent references, no red flags. She nodded once when introduced to the house rules. Then she began working. The first week, Song-woo barely noticed her. She moved through rooms like water through cracks. Present but unobtrusive. Efficient but invisible. The house remained silent, but the silence felt different. Less oppressive. Less like a punishment. The second week, he slept. 6 hours the first night. 7 the second. By the fourth night, he woke without the usual tightness in his chest, without the phantom weight that had lived behind his ribs for 2 decades. He did not understand it. He told himself it was the tea she brewed each morning. Green tea with a hint of honey was left on his desk before he woke. He told himself it was the way she opened windows at dawn, letting cold air push through rooms that had been sealed for years. He told himself it meant nothing. But the house felt different. The air moved. Light reached corners it had not reached before. The oppressive silence became something softer. Not peaceful. Not comfortable. But breathable. By the third week, Song-woo found himself checking the security cameras without reason. She was always working. Always precise. She never spoke to herself. Never hummed while cleaning. Never paused to look at family photographs or expensive art or anything that might suggest curiosity about the man who lived here. She simply moved through the house as if it were a space that required care but not judgment. And the ring never left her finger. Song-woo watched footage of her washing dishes. The copper wire caught the light each time her hands moved through water. He watched her fold laundry. The ring pressed against the fabric, leaving small indentations. He watched her arrange flowers in the entryway. The ring glinted dull and unremarkable against the stems. She never adjusted it. Never hid it. Never removed it. She wore it the way someone wears a name. One morning, before leaving for a Lunar New Year planning meeting, Song-woo placed a bowl of taeguk on the kitchen counter. He did not explain why. He simply left it there and drove to Uedo. That evening, he replayed the footage. Mina entered the kitchen at her usual time. She saw the bowl immediately. Her hand moved toward it, then stopped. 3 seconds passed. Her fingers hovered above the broth. Not touching. Not taking. Just hovering. Then she covered the bowl with her palm. Not with a lid. With her hand. As if protecting it from something unseen. She stood there for 10 seconds. Then she walked away. The bowl remained untouched. Song-woo rewound the footage. Watched it again. And again. She recognized the dish. She recognized what it meant. And she refused to acknowledge it. That night, he slept for 8 hours. When he woke, the tekguk was gone. The bowl was washed and placed back in the cabinet with surgical precision. No note. No explanation. No acknowledgement. Just the ring, still on her finger, still catching light from the kitchen window as she moved through her morning routine. Songwoo sat at his desk and stared at the monitor. She knew. She had always known. The gala was held at the Shilla Hotel in Jamsil, the kind of event Korean elites favored, tasteful, understated, full of people who spoke softly about generosity while calculating returns on influence. Songwoo attended because his advisors insisted. Recent rumors about his growing reach had attracted press attention. Appearing at a charity fundraiser would soften edges, create favorable headlines, and remind people that power could wear a benevolent face. He brought minimal security. 2 men in dark suits are positioned near exits. Enough presence to be noticed. Not enough to be threatening. The evening moved smoothly. Politicians shook his hand with practiced warmth. Business owners nodded with cautious respect. Photographers captured moments that would appear in morning papers with captions about civic engagement and community leadership. Songwoo played the role he had perfected over 2 decades. Polite. Reserved. Unremarkable in every way that mattered. The staff moved through the room with trays, champagne, hors d'oeuvres, small desserts arranged with precision. Mina was among them. His assistant had arranged it. Additional help needed for the event. Standard protocol. She wore the same gray dress as always, her movements carrying the same careful efficiency. Songwoo noticed her immediately. So did others. A guest, older, wealthy, drunk enough to forget discretion, laughed when Mina passed with a tray of champagne glasses. "Is that copper?" He pointed at her hand. "Even the staff are pretending now." His companion laughed. Others nearby turned, amused. Mina's hand faltered. The ring caught the chandelier light for a fraction of a second. Then it slipped. The copper wire, worn thin after decades of wear, caught on the edge of the tray. The ring tumbled. Rolled across polished marble. Disappeared under a table surrounded by guests. Mina dropped to her knees without hesitation. The room did not go silent immediately. Conversation continued. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed at a joke told 3 feet away. But Songwoo heard nothing except the sound of copper hitting marble. He moved before thinking. Crossed the room in 6 steps. Reached the table. Pushed aside a chair that cost more than most people earned in a month. And knelt. The room went still. Chairman Park Songwoo, whose name appeared in hushed conversations and sealed documents, whose presence commanded respect through absence rather than declaration, was on his knees in the center of a charity gala. He found the ring under the table leg. Copper wire. Black bead. Chipped, dull, and worthless to everyone watching. He stood slowly. Mina remained on her knees, head down, hands pressed against the floor. Songwoo reached for her hand. She did not pull away. Did not resist. Did not look up. He slid the ring back onto her finger. His hands were steady. "This," he said quietly, his voice carrying just far enough, "is not something you are allowed to touch." He did not raise his voice. Did not threaten. Did not need to. The guest who had laughed went pale. No one spoke. No one moved. Songwoo helped Mina to her feet. She stood without meeting his eyes. Without acknowledgement. Without gratitude. She simply adjusted the tray, turned, and walked back toward the kitchen. Songwoo returned to his table. Conversation resumed slowly. Carefully. The evening continued as if nothing had happened, but everyone understood what had been witnessed. Protection. Claim. A line drawn in public that no one would dare cross. Song-woo left an hour later. His security followed. The car glided through Seoul streets in silence. When he arrived home, the house was dark. He went to his office. Pulled up the security feed. Mina's room was empty. Her bag was gone. The next morning, his assistant confirmed what Song-woo already knew. She had left during the night. No forwarding address. No explanation. No contact information beyond the agency that had referred her. On his desk, placed with surgical precision, was a folded piece of paper. Song-woo sat down. His hands shook when he opened it. The letter was brief. No apology. No explanation. No accusation. Just 7 lines written in careful handwriting that looked exactly like the letters she used to write on the margins of borrowed textbooks at Garam Children's Home. I did not come to remind you of the promise. I came to see what kind of man you became. Now I know. Please don't look for me. Some questions answer themselves. Some don't require confrontation. Thank you for returning the ring. Song-woo read it 3 times. Then he called his security chief. The housekeeper who left last night. I need her background check. The full version. His security chief hesitated. Sir, we already. The full version. Silence. I'll have it within the hour. The file arrived 40 minutes later. Song-woo opened it alone in his office, the letter still on his desk beside the folder. Mina Lee. 36. Extensive experience in private residences across Seoul, Busan, and Jeju. Glowing references. No criminal record. No social media presence. No family listed. Employment history tracked back 12 years. Before that, nothing. As if she had appeared fully formed at age 24 with perfect references and no past. Song-woo scanned further. The agency that referred her was based in Itaewon. Small. Discreet. The kind that specialized in providing help for clients who valued privacy over everything else. His security chief had included a note at the bottom of the file. Additional detail, the subject specifically requested assignment to your residence. Turned down higher paying positions with 2 other clients. Provided reference only from the Itaewon agency. The agency owner is reluctant to provide details, but confirmed the subject paid a placement fee 300% above the standard rate to ensure assignment. Song-woo stopped breathing. She had not stumbled into his employment. She had not been assigned randomly. She had paid. She had chosen him. Specifically. He rewound his memory of the past 3 weeks. Her arrival. Her precision. The way she moved through his house was as if she had studied its layout before setting foot inside. The tea she brewed. The windows she opened. The rooms she cleaned in an order that somehow made the house breathable again. The taeguk she refused to acknowledge. The ring she never removed. She had not come to work. She had come to observe. Song-woo pulled up archived security footage. Started from her first day. He watched her enter the house. Watched her receive instructions from his assistant. Watched her nod and begin working with the same methodical care he had witnessed every day since. But now he saw what he had missed. The way her eyes moved across rooms. Not cleaning. Cataloging. The way she paused near certain objects. A photograph on the mantel. A painting in the hallway. A book on his desk. The way she stood in doorways for seconds longer than necessary, as if measuring something invisible. She had been studying him. Learning him. Deciding something. Song-woo closed the laptop. His hands were steady, but his pulse was not. She had returned after 20 years. She had paid to enter his life. She had watched him from inside his own home. And he had not noticed until she was gone. His phone buzzed. A meeting in 30 minutes. He dismissed it. He opened the letter again. I came to see what kind of man you became. Now I know. Song-woo sat in silence as dawn crept through the windows. For the first time in 2 decades, power felt useless. She had evaluated him. And she had left without delivering a verdict. Not knowing was worse than any confrontation. The question was worse than any answer. He stared at the letter until the words blurred. Then he made a decision that violated every rule he had lived by since leaving Garam Children's home. He would find her. And he would break his own promise never to look back. Song-woo burned the letter that night. Not out of anger. Not out of fear. But because keeping it would have been a confession he was not ready to make. He watched the paper curl and blacken in the metal waste bin in his office. Watched the careful handwriting disappear into ash. Watched the last physical evidence of her presence in his house reduced to nothing. But the words remained. I came to see what kind of man you became. He had spent 20 years constructing an answer to that question. 20 years building a version of himself that required no justification, no explanation, no apology. Chairman Park Song-woo was a man of control. Of influence. Of calculated decisions that moved markets and silenced opposition. He was not a man who knelt in public for a copper ring. He was not a man who replayed security footage obsessively, searching for meaning in the tilt of a housekeeper's head. He was not a man who burned letters because reading them a 4th time would break something he could not afford to lose. But he had done all 3. His security chief called the next morning. Sir, I located the agency owner in Itaewon. He's willing to meet. When? This afternoon. But sir, he indicated the subject specifically instructed. I don't care what she instructed. Silence. Understood. Song-woo drove himself to Itaewon. No security. No assistant. No convoy of black vehicles that announced his presence before arrival. Just a single car. Just himself. Just the quiet admission that this required invisibility. The agency occupied the 2nd floor of a narrow building wedged between a convenience store and a restaurant that served late-night soup. The stairs were steep. The hallway smelled like old paint and cooking oil. The owner was a man in his 60s, thin and careful, who did not stand when Song-woo entered. Chairman Park, he said. I expected this visit 3 weeks ago. Song-woo sat without being invited. Where is she? The man smiled slightly. She paid me not to answer that question. I'll pay more. I'm sure you would. But some transactions aren't about money. Song-woo leaned forward. Then what are they about? The man studied him for a long moment. She told me you would come. She told me you would offer money first, threat second, and desperation third. He paused. She told me to give you something if you reached desperation. He opened a desk drawer and placed a folded piece of paper on the desk. Not a letter. An address. Song-woo took it without speaking. The man leaned back. She also told me to tell you something. Song-woo waited. She said you always knew where she was. You just chose not to look. The words hit like cold water. Song-woo stood. Left the office. Descended the stairs with hands that trembled for the first time since he was 16. She was right. He had known. Not consciously. Not deliberately. But somewhere beneath the constructed identity and the carefully maintained distance, he had known that finding her would have been possible at any point in the past 2 decades. He had chosen not to. He had chosen forgetting over searching. He had chosen the life he built over the promise he made. And she had known that too. Song-woo sat in his car outside the building, staring at the address written in unfamiliar handwriting. An apartment in Itaewon. 20 minutes away. Close enough that he could have found her accidentally at any point in 20 years. far enough that he never had to. His phone buzzed. His assistant. A meeting. A signature is required. A decision is waiting. Song-woo turned off his phone. Then he drove toward the address, breaking the only rule that had kept him intact for 2 decades. He was going back. The building was narrow. 4 stories. Sandwiched between a coffee shop and a small bookstore that looked like it had survived on stubbornness rather than profit. Song-woo stood outside for 3 minutes. His hand hovered over the intercom panel. His finger refused to press the button marked 3B. He had crossed hostile boardrooms without hesitation. He had walked into warehouses where men waited with unsettled debts and volatile tempers. He had signed documents that erased entire companies before lunch. But pressing a doorbell required courage he was not certain he possessed. The door opened before he decided. Mina stood in the entrance, wearing the same gray dress, her expression unchanged. "You took your time," she said. Song-woo swallowed. "I always do." She stepped aside. The apartment was small. Clean. Filled with plants that had been cared for with the same precision she brought to everything else. Second-hand books lined makeshift shelves. A low table sat near the window, sunlight cutting across its surface. On the table lay documents. Song-woo recognized them immediately. Property maps. Shipping manifests. Names he had buried. Companies that existed only in archived records and sealed files. Transactions that had been designed never to surface. His chest tightened. Mina closed the door. Gestured toward the table. "Sit." Song-woo sat. She remained standing, her back to the window, light framing her in a way that made her impossible to read. "I didn't come back for love," she said quietly. Her voice carried the same steadiness it had 20 years ago. The steadiness that came from surviving without hope of rescue. "I came back for the truth." Song-woo forced himself to look at the documents instead of her face. Property records from Suwon. Dates that matched his time at Garam Children's Home. A list of children who had been transferred to private sponsors. His name was not on it, but the company that had sponsored him was. Shipping manifests from ports in Incheon and Busan. Dates spanning 15 years. Cargo listed as construction materials, textiles, and electronics. But Song-woo knew what those manifests actually tracked. Mina spoke without inflection. Garam Children's Home was shut down 8 years ago. Trafficking allegations. Children moved through unofficial adoption channels. Records erased. Staff disappeared before investigators arrived. She picked up one of the documents. Held it without looking at it. "I spent years tracing the paper trail. Learning systems. Learning silence. Learning how to move through spaces where questions weren't welcome." She set the document down. "And every path led to you. Or to men who worked for you. Or to companies you controlled through intermediaries no one was supposed to notice." Song-woo felt something cold settle in his stomach. "I never knew," he said. The words sounded weak even as he spoke them. Mina nodded. "I believe you." She moved to the window. Looked out at the street below. "That doesn't change what happened." Song-woo stared at the documents. Saw his life reconstructed through transactions he had approved without understanding their full scope. Saw the network of influence he had built, unaware that its roots reached back to the place he had tried to erase. "The sponsors who took me," he said slowly. "They were connected." "Yes." "To trafficking." "Yes." "And I helped them." Mina turned. Her expression remained neutral. "You helped them become legitimate. You laundered influence through construction and shipping. You created pathways that looked legal. You didn't know what you were cleaning, but you cleaned it efficiently." Song-woo closed his eyes. 20 years of careful control. 20 years of calculated distance. 20 years of telling himself he had escaped cleanly. And the escape had been built on the same system that had destroyed the place he left behind. "What do you want?" he asked. Mina picked up her coat from a chair. Slipped it on with the same methodical care she brought to everything. "I wanted to know if the boy who made that ring still existed," she said. She walked to the door. Paused with her hand on the handle. "And if the man you became was worth confronting." She opened the door. Song-woo stood. "Where are you going?" "I don't know yet." "The documents are copies. I have the original somewhere safe." She looked at him directly for the first time since he entered. "This is where my questions begin. Whether you answer them is your choice." "What questions?" Mina smiled slightly. It was not a kind smile. Not a cruel one. Just honest. Whether power matters more than truth. Whether the life you built is worth protecting. Whether the promise you made still means anything, or if it was just something children say when they're desperate. She stepped into the hallway. "I'll be watching," she said. "To see what you choose." Then she left. Song-woo stood in the empty apartment, surrounded by evidence of complicity he had never intended but could not deny. The door remained open. Outside, traffic moved through Itaewon streets. Voices drifted up from the coffee shop below. Life continued as if nothing had fractured. But something had. And Song-woo understood, with the clarity that comes only from collision with truth, that the past 20 years had been a carefully constructed lie. Not because he had meant to deceive. But because he had chosen not to see. Song-woo sat alone as dawn crept across Itaewon. He had not left Mina's apartment. Had not moved from the chair beside the table covered in documents that rewrote his understanding of his own life. Outside, the city woke. Shopkeepers opened metal grates. Early commuters moved toward subway stations. Delivery trucks rumbled through narrow streets. Inside, Song-woo stared at a copper ring he had retrieved from his pocket. Not Mina's ring. His own. He had kept it all these years. Hidden in a safe deposit box in a bank he visited once annually to verify its contents. Alongside documents that proved his identity. Alongside emergency funds. Alongside the things a man keeps when he understands that power can disappear overnight. The ring was identical to hers. Same crude wire. Same chipped black bead. Same asymmetrical construction. He had made two that night in the laundry room at Garam Children's Home. One for her. One for himself. He had worn his for exactly 14 days. Then he had removed it the morning the black sedan arrived. Placed it in his pocket. Told himself he would put it back on when he returned. He never returned. But he never discarded it either. For 20 years, it had existed in the space between intention and action. Between promise and abandonment. Between the boy he had been and the man he became. Song-woo turned the ring slowly between his fingers. Power had never felt meaningless before. He had wielded it with precision. With calculation. With the understanding that influence was currency and control was survival. But sitting in Mina's apartment, surrounded by evidence of systems he had helped legitimize without understanding their cost, power felt like exactly what it was. A tool. Nothing more. And tools could build or destroy depending on the hand that held them. The documents on the table represented choices. Confrontation or concealment. Truth or preservation. Justice or survival. Song-woo had spent 2 decades choosing survival. Choosing distance over connection. Choosing forgetting over remembering. Choosing the constructed identity over the abandoned promise. And Mina had returned to ask a single question. Not with words. Not with accusation. But with presence. What kind of man did you become? Song-woo stood. Walked to the window. Watched sunlight spread across buildings that had stood for decades, weathering change and remaining. He thought about the boy who twisted copper wire until his fingers bled. He thought about the man who knelt in public to retrieve a worthless ring. He thought about the 20 years between those two moments. And he understood that Mina had not returned for love. She had returned for accounting. Not financial. Not legal. Moral. She had returned to see if the debt he owed, to her, to the children who disappeared through systems he unknowingly helped operate, to the promise he made and abandoned, could still be acknowledged. Not repaid. Some debts could not be repaid. But acknowledged. Song-woo picked up one of the documents. A list of children transferred from Garam Children's Home between 1998 and 2003. 47 names. Dates. Destinations listed as private sponsorship. He recognized the companies that received them. He had worked with 3 of them directly. His phone was still off. His assistant would be frantic by now. Meetings missed. Signatures delayed. The carefully maintained machinery of his life was grinding to a halt because its operator had disappeared. Song-woo turned his phone on. 17 missed calls. 32 messages. He ignored them all. Instead, he called his attorney. The one he kept for matters that required absolute discretion. "I need you to prepare documents," Song-woo said. "Full disclosure. Everything is connected to the Garam Children's Home trafficking investigation. Every company I worked with. Every transaction that might have been connected." Silence on the other end. "Sir, that would expose everything." "I know. The legal implications. I understand. Your reputation is not the priority." More silence. "This will destroy what you've built." Song-woo looked at the copper ring in his hand. Then it should have been destroyed 20 years ago. He ended the call. Outside, Itaewon continued its morning routine. Unaware. Unconcerned. Indifferent to the fracture happening in a small apartment above a coffee shop. Song-woo placed his ring on the table beside Mina's documents. 2 copper rings. 2 promises. 2 versions of the same boy who thought survival required erasure. He had been wrong. Survival required acknowledgement. Not a success. Not of power. Not of carefully constructed legitimacy. But of cost. Of complicity. Of the people left behind when escape came with conditions. Song-woo did not know if Mina would ever speak to him again. He did not know if confession would lead to legal consequences, public destruction, or complete erasure of the life he had built. He did not know if the promise he made at 16 could still mean anything at 36. But he knew what the boy who made that ring would have wanted him to do. And for the first time in 20 years, that mattered more than power. Song-woo gathered the documents. Left the apartment. Descended the narrow stairs into morning light. The past he had buried was demanding a price. And he was finally ready to pay it. Not because it would bring redemption. Not because it would restore what was lost. But because some promises don't ask to be kept. They ask to be answered. And the answer required more courage than any decision he had made in 2 decades. The answer required becoming the kind of man the ring had always deserved.